Hello, hi, and welcome to another episode of Wellness in the Workplace. My name is Mzinyane, and I am your host. Wellness in the Workplace is a podcast that aims to equip new and experienced professionals with the tools and insights to navigate challenging workplace dynamics. And on today's episode, we have an exclusive interview with a returning guest to the podcast. And the only difference now is that she's returning to the podcast with a new title under her belt. She is a business consultant, a workplace bullying practitioner, a lecturer at the Gordon Institute of Business Science, and most recently, the author of Building Psychologically Safe Spaces, Safeguarding Your Workplace Against Bullying. Her name is Dr. Ngao Motsei. Welcome to Wellness in the Workplace.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for having me again.
Thank you for availing yourself and for being here. I mean, you've been doing a book drive for the last few months. It's been about 2-3 months since...
It's 2 months. It's launched on February the 22nd.
February the 22nd. Okay. And so it's been a lot of socializing the book on different platforms. I was fortunately at your book launch, which was an amazing success. But I think my first question to ease into our conversation today is, how does it feel to live in the reality or manifestation of a goal that you set out as far back as 2016?
It is actually quite amazing and humbling. And, after writing the book and when it was in the publishers, I had all sorts of emotions and looking back. But also what was satisfying is the notion of planning. You can have the most wonderful plan, but if you don't execute, and execution also takes a lot of commitment, but not just commitment, discipline. I mean, to even write the book, because this is something that I always wanted to do. And the one day in January last year, I said, this is it.
This is the time.
It's now or never. And actually putting aside time and going through your own notes that you've made over the years, going through my dissertation and all that, it is quite a great feeling. It's kind of gratifying.
Someone once said that the writing process is very cathartic. And I would assume it was the case in your process of writing as well, especially because it is drawn from a dissertation, but prior to that, drawn from a personal experience.
Yeah.
So a lot of reflections there. But to make sure that anyone who is listening or watching has an understanding and a basic foundation of some of the terms that are being used in your book, and specifically in the title of your book, I want us to start off by defining what a psychologically safe space is.
Okay, great. I mean, in its simplest form, a psychologically safe space is an environment where everybody feels free and safe to speak up, to express their concerns and opinions, to question, and even to raise the uncomfortable questions, whether to leaders or to anybody, and essentially to report or identify abuse if there's abuse. So it is the simplest way, really. A psychologically safe space is a space where there's a belief that everybody is free to express and their concerns and ideas and give feedback without fear of retribution.
What makes workplace bullying, specifically in the South African context, so complex and so difficult to define?
I think one of the things that I found, I actually wrote a paper that was titled, Societal Context Matter. And the reason I wrote that, and that was one of the key findings from my study, because what happens in organizations is a reflection of what happens at the societal level. And South Africa, with its complexity, with our own issues, history, and the almost like the context where there's a lot of things that are happening. There's violence, there's abuse, there's wellness issues. So it's not surprising that that is also experienced and it spills over into the workplace. But the other thing also is that until at least before the Code of Good Practice, we did not have any legal framework that defined what bullying is, or that the behavior that is considered to be bullying. So it made it very, very difficult for anybody to actually even speak about it, because how are you, what context are you going to speak about it from? What is the frame of reference that you're going to speak about it from? The other thing I think is that when it's being reported, the tendency is for leaders not to do anything about it. So it kind of, all those things that I've spoken about also from a societal context, and the fact that nothing gets done, it almost like normalizes bullying. So that is one of the difficulties. And hence it's called, we tend to refer to it as a silent epidemic, because nobody speaks about it. And when you speak about it, there's actually, what tends to happen is further intimidation. So everybody then kind of sits silently and suffers silently.
Sure. So the first time that you were on the podcast, you highlighted a number of bullying tactics that we typically see in the organization. For anyone who didn't listen to that episode, but also as a refresher for those who may have listened but have now forgotten, can we just go back to that in terms of just identifying the signs, the tactics, and the behaviors of bullies in the workplace?
There are essentially two groups, if you like. Those that are visible, that are overt, where there's shouting, there's screaming and demeaning in public. And then there are those that are very so subtle that you actually wonder, many targets would question themselves to say, am I actually being bullied? For example, is manipulation.
Sure.
Some of the tactics that they would use would be manipulation. And manipulation would be one of the typical examples that I found, some kind of a theme that the targets that I spoke to refer to is, for example, I'm on leave and I get an email to come back to the office or a request to do some work. When I say, but I'm on leave, so I can it not wait? Then the use of guilt. But how much time have you taken? Free time have you taken to attend to things of your own? And the other is one of the biggest one is also hiding things around performance. But it also comes in, the subtleness of it comes in moving, shifting goalposts. And being vague in giving directions. And when you are not very directive in terms of this is what I request of you, require of you to do, and when you don't do it, blaming on you are not performing. Whereas in the beginning, I either shifted goals, and then with the shifting of goals, I was vague in terms of what I require of you. So those are some of the subtle ones that are actually difficult, that cause a lot of sometimes doubt on the part of target to say, is this actually happening? Is it bullying? And then another example is just refusing access to opportunities, whether it be training or things that you actually require to be able to perform your job well. So those are some of the examples and the behaviors and the tactics that that abrasive bullying bosses use.
Yeah. I think the one that makes, the target question themselves is what has become a popular term around gaslighting,
Yeah.
where people didn't actually know how to define that experience where you question your reality and you even question the events that have occurred. And so to be able to name things and give them labels at least helps to contextualize that. And I think for me in reading the book, the shifting of goalposts, I didn't realize was a tactic. And that was a bit of an epiphany moment for me as well. So in a chapter in the book, you also highlight the different types of bullies. And this was in reference to a study that was done, I think, by another author. And I think that was so interesting in just having to understand the differences between the styles of bullying. So for anyone who hasn't read the book, do you mind maybe just taking us through the three different types that you highlighted in the book?
No problem. The first type is the conqueror. And as the name denotes, the conqueror is somebody that uses power, control. So typically the conquerors would also be your line manager. So I have control over whether you assign your leave form, or I have control over whether I put you up for promotion. So the conquerors tend to be very, 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 very abrasive in using their power and control. Typically you're my way or the highway.
Sure.
And the other type I had referred to earlier on, the manipulator. So, and sometimes the manipulator is very, very organizationally savvy.
Can play politics.
Can play politics. Politically very savvy to the point where you actually question yourself. And as I said earlier on, using guilt, and they give a few latitudes and then use it against you. But what I'm asking you is to do a little bit extra, like come back from leave and do this because this is urgent. And typically, some of the things that targets are being required to do to come out of leave for are actually not really urgent. It's not. It's something that could have waited. The third type is the performer.
Okay.
The performer really, the types of abrasive bullying leaders who love the attention on them all the time. So anybody that comes into that being, into the light, and where they see them as taking the light from them, becomes a threat. So it's more self-absorbed people who want all the attention on them. And typically, one of the ways that they perform, or that you can identify them, is always blaming. But if you do well, I'll take the credit.
Sure.
And not acknowledging the work and the input that others have contributed to the success of whatever it is that they're taking credit for.
I think what was interesting with the performer is that you mentioned that it's typically individuals who end up in a role prior to them having to maybe either have enough experience or have prior experience within a leadership role of leading a team, of leading a project, etc. So it could just be a way of covering some form of insecurity in their style of leadership or in them bullying their targets.
I'm actually very impressed. You did read
I
the
did
book.
read. I did.
You read that. Because as you're saying, you're actually even helping remember what I've written. Because yes, you're right. And some of it is, some of them are typically people that would have been promoted very quickly.
Yes.
So they know that, I've got limitations. So they tend to hide their limitations by by doing all these things and demeaning people by taking away, almost like taking away their own limitations by degrading and degrading others.
And also, I mean, not only did you highlight the different types of bullies, you also mentioned the different types of bullying. So we would assume that bullying typically happens, in what would be described as upward bullying, actually downward bullying.
Yeah.
If it's the, the person in charge or a manager, then bullying and a subordinate. But you mentioned that there's also upward bullying.
Yeah.
You also mentioned that there is peer-to-peer bullying.
Yeah.
Do you mind maybe just differentiating between those as well?
Okay, so the one that everybody is typically, the common one is the downward bullying, the normal one where the manager is the bully or the target is being bullied by somebody that is their manager. But it is also possible to be bullied by your peer. This is peer to peer. And what makes that possible is power or proximity to power. In one of the examples that I used, the first target I interviewed, I remember many years ago in my study, and the person said, "I'm being bullied by my peer, somebody that's on that same level as me." And I said, "But how is that possible?" It turned out that the person, the bully, was somebody else's, was the wife of the COO of the company. So there was proximity to power. And typically what happens then is that the person would typically have access to information that otherwise nobody would have. And by virtue of having such proximity to power, it also causes fear on the part of the target. I can't push back because otherwise I might be threatened or might be career limiting. The same concept also with upward bullying. Upward bullying is where, for example, the junior, you essentially being bullied by somebody that's junior to you. What happens is that, again, it's about proximity to power. In many instances, in what I found in the research is that what would have happened was, for example, the two people, the manager and the bully, who's the junior, were at the same level, and the other person got promoted. So there are issues like, we were at the same level, but then what happens is that the target would almost like disrespect and jump over the manager because they have relationships, for example, with somebody that's senior to that line manager. So it's always about power and power imbalance. And it's also relational power that power comes from, as I said, being close to somebody that's in higher echelons of power.
I think another example that comes to mind, and one that was highlighted in the book, was people who typically have been in the organization for a really long time. Right? And so if you are external, that you come into a new environment and now you're a manager in charge of a team of people who have been there for a really long time, it does pose a situation where, that kind of bullying could actually happen. So then in terms of a popular term that has been doing the rounds over the last few years around narcissistic bosses or narcissism, what would you say is the difference between a narcissistic boss and an abrasive leader, i.e. bully? And how does bullying then manifest between the two types?
Yeah. Well, first of all, and you hear in my language, I use an abrasive leader that bullies, and that's exactly the point, because abrasion is a behavior, and with correct support and with self-awareness, a behavior can be changed, can be shifted, whereas a narcissistic leader is somebody they are the center of attraction.
Sure.
They have a very, very high sense of self and self-regard. So everybody is stupid, they are brilliant. Everybody's wrong, they are right. So there is, in terms of the capacity to change the behavior, it's almost non-existent for narcissistic leaders, which is why in my work, the coaching that I think I've been doing over 2 years, I came across one narcissistic leader, and you immediately know, even in the language. And I mean, and it's almost like I know it all, says the right thing, but never acknowledges that, there could be something here. Not everybody could be wrong. Have you ever actually taken a minute to think about, is it possible that I might be doing this? Because everybody is saying this. So in that one case, by the second or third session, I just knew that we're not going to go anywhere. I actually had to go back to the sponsor to say, there is nothing I can do here. Because it takes the risk for anybody to change. It takes responsibility. First of all, acknowledgement that not everybody could be wrong. This may be indeed how I show up. So there is capacity to change with the right support for the abrasive leaders that bully the narcissistic. Not in my case, no, I don't think so.
Just out of curiosity, are the narcissistic bosses usually competent?
If you define competent in getting things done, then yes.
Okay.
Because this person that I'm referring to was, the targets, they're meeting all the financial targets and well connected and influence and all that. So they were really, really doing well as far as meeting all the financial metrics and bringing business in, but at the expense of people, literally and metaphorically, almost living blood on the floor.
Sure. So then looking at the different key players within a workplace bullying context, we've spoken about targets, we've spoken about the bully. There's a third one that you highlighted in your book, and that's the bystander.
Yeah.
So let's talk about then the bystanders. What do you think the risk is for them with not speaking up? Because I think a lot of them don't speak up because of the risk of, or fear rather, of being a target next, or thinking that speaking up will be a career limiting move for them. So what are the risks, not only just for them in not speaking up, but I guess for the organization at large?
Well, the risk is essentially they're also complicit. I mean, I often say that it's a tough one for many people to swallow, but there is no such thing as an innocent bystander. By witnessing the abuse and standing by and doing nothing, you are actually enabling it.
Sure.
So the risk, I suppose, is that organizationally, you are contributing to a toxic culture, to a culture that kind of normalizes this kind of behavior. The other risk to self is actually exactly that. There is no guarantee that you would not be bullied yourself. So today's bystander is tomorrow's target. And so it's a question of reframing and looking at, if this was happening to me now and everybody was seeing it and nobody was doing anything about it, how would that be? How would that feel for me?
How can then bystanders empower themselves to speak up?
So one of the things, it is a very, very difficult one, unless organizations put in place processes and socialize them, where everybody knows that, in the event that I see something happening, this is what I can do. But what they can do for starters, because many organizations have got these ethics hotlines. So at the very least, if you don't feel safe to speak up, use and report, use those ethics hotlines, the anonymous type of lines. Lines. So this is also typically when I get called to work inside an organization or to work with somebody that has been accused of bullying. Typically, that's how issues get raised. If not directly, many of the abuse, the bullying gets reported using these hotlines.
And when reaching out to the hotline, what are the things that potentially a bystander can note in reporting this incident of workplace bullying?
So one of the things that I also write about and I speak about is essentially the behavior. The first thing is for people to equip themselves with understanding what behavior constitutes bullying and what behavior does not constitute bullying, which is what I typically call reasonable management action. So the first thing now, I think, which is useful because we have a legal framework. So I urge people to actually go look at the Code of Good Practice for the prevention and elimination of harassment at work, because there's a section that specifically speaks about behavior that is considered bullying. Granted, it locates bullying within the context of harassment, but the behaviors that they describe as harassment and as bullying are the same. But what I really love about the overarching definition of bullying in the code, they define it as behavior that impairs dignity.
Sure. That's so powerful.
And the powerful thing, how powerful is this? Behavior that impairs dignity. And what they say is that the onus, it doesn't matter whether the intent was there, the issue about intent, whether it doesn't matter whether or not the abusive leader intended or not. The fact that the person whose behavior dignity is being impaired, that's enough for it to be constituted as bullying.
Sure, that's such a powerful definition because that's exactly what it does. It strips you away of your dignity and doesn't recognize your humanity.
Yes.
So powerful definition there. So in terms of then post-pandemic, 2024 now, we've seen changes in the ways of work. We've seen hybrid remote work, coming up a lot. Yes, there may have been calls here and there for people to return to the office full time, which I do think to some degree is a form of bullying tactic, especially if individuals have been able to display the same quality of work and degree of commitment working remotely. But coming back then to remote work, hybrid work, would you say that these new ways of work have exacerbated or alleviated workplace bullying?
So maybe the two things. During COVID itself, the cyberbullying shot up because of the expectation that you're at home, the expectation for people to be online 24/7. You're going nowhere. So be attentive, be ready to be called to do work. But in today's hybrid world, what happens, I think the impact of it and the use of technology is about the speed with which the abuse spread.
Sure.
Think about the emails, and one of the things that I found in some of the focus group sessions that I've had is that people find out that when nasty emails have been sent, a whole lot of the world was blind copied. So you have no knowledge of even knowing how far, how many people have seen this. And the thing also is once you hit the send button, it's gone. So the reach is makes it much quicker, wider. The same with, even because now with the advent of hybrid working, if everybody has got WhatsApp groups, there's so many WhatsApp groups. So the abuse, when it happens there, again, even if you retrieve it, but the damage is already done. So I think the dynamic of hybrid work and the use of technology is that the humiliation happens, even it spreads, and it's much wider and happens very quickly.
Mm-mm. So on page 35 of your book, you mentioned that reflection and self-awareness are at the center of just perceiving your situation and your, I guess, conditions differently. How would you say that reflection and self-awareness can be useful for the target, for the bystander, and most importantly for the bully?
Yeah. Well, what I talk about there is what worked for me. So, and I do realize that self-reflection and self-awareness is a skill. Is a skill that you can cultivate. So, not many people have the skill, particularly the abrasive leaders. One of the things that I get once I start working with them, I actually realized how little they are aware about how their actions are impacting others. So very little self-awareness. But with the support, with the coaching, what it really does is put a mirror in front of them to actually look back and see, and with that is the beginning of cultivating self-awareness, because with heightened self-awareness, you can begin to change the behavior. They can begin to change the behavior and catch themselves when they start doing the certain things. So the same can also be useful for targets, because often what happens with targets is questioning yourself. This is, what have I done? Maybe there's something in me, in the way that I work, that may have caused this. So part of it is also to, and I usually say, for lack of, I don't have a good phrase, but cut yourself some slack. It's not necessarily your fault. Just have a look at what the pattern of behaviors when certain things happen, when the bully, the abrasive leader does certain things to you, what might have been the cause, and just document that. Document that. And one of the ways really is really to take care of yourself. And for me, self-reflection, and it's also might also be important for you to find out something that works for you. For sometimes just walking or meditation or however way, journaling. For me, also journaling was a big one, where I simply just poured my heart out onto the pages. And the other thing is also to, if you have one or two people around you, your confidants, people that you can speak to, talk to about your experiences. Sometimes the act of just talking to somebody that is empathetic, that is listening, is enough without them telling you what to do, because they can't. How can they advise you? You can never really understand the effect and the impact of bullying, the dignity that is impaired by the bullying. So those are some of the things that I think people might consider if they're in this kind of situation.
My big question: can one really bully-proof themselves?
I believe they can. Actually, I thought the best way to do that is actually to read because I get asked this a lot. So in anticipating that, I brought this. So, and really it stems from the fact that you cannot control somebody else. So all you can do is look at what you can control yourself, because we can't control someone else's behavior. We can certainly control how we respond to it. So I wrote here, this is why I believe it is possible. It's on page 74.
Okay.
This is why I believe it is possible to bully-proof yourself against the bully's destructive behavior, just as you can bully-proof an organization. And I'm just going to read the three things. The first step here is to understand that if you have drawn the ire of a bully, it is best to resist the urge to take them on. You simply cannot go toe-to-toe with a bullying boss by playing their manipulative mind games, because you are likely to lose. That's because targets are almost always wired very differently to pernicious bosses, and therefore think, behave, and even present differently. What to do instead? Focus on what you can control. For example, do whatever it takes to keep up your performance, unless your health dictates otherwise, because this is usually one of the very first areas a bully attacks.
Sure.
Letting yourself slip gives them ammunition. So this, I suggest these are just some examples of how people can bully-proof themselves. Responding, not reacting, because there's no ways of you controlling someone else's behavior. The most important one that I just want to make is that make a point of recording all instances of abusive behavior, being as specific as possible. For example, note the dates of the incidents, the events preceding it, where it took place, who was present, and any other details you can think of or feel may be relevant.
Sure. Yeah, it is very practical. However, quite easier said than done in most instances.
Yeah.
And like you said, I think for anybody going through this, cutting yourself some slack is probably the most important thing you can do. Being very compassionate that this is not a situation you brought upon yourself, because a bully is a bully is a bully. And they can target anyone. They can target anyone. So in closing, how has your perspective about workplace bullying changed since you started writing the book versus a number of years ago when you did your research?
As I was preparing and thinking about our discussion, I think what has not so much changed, but what has been illuminated for me about all the abuse in the workplace is that psychological safety is key, is paramount. There would not be bullying if there's people feel psychologically safe. There will not be mental health or stresses, and people would not be unwell due to the high levels of stress and all that if there was psychological safety in the organization. So that became that point of psychological safety, which is why I actually titled the book Building Psychologically Safe Spaces as a way of safeguarding the workplace against bullying.
Any closing remarks? Where can we find you on social media? Where can we find your book if we want to make a purchase?
I think the book is in all major bookstores, mainly exclusive books. And online, I think you can find it at all the online book outlets. And I'm on all social media, on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. Was not that big on Facebook, but I was told.
But you're still there.
Yeah, I'm still there. Yeah. So yes, I am on social media and also on my website. People can go on my website, ngaomotsei.com.
Dr. Ngao, thank you so much. And congratulations once again. This
Thank
is
you.
a big deal. And we need to make a big deal about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I also have to congratulate you.
Thank you.
I've also been watching you grow, your podcast growing, and the kind of conversations that you're having on the podcast are very, very useful conversations that we have. We are to have. So very well done.
Thank you so
to
much.
too
Thank
as
you.
well.
And thank you for watching. This is Wellness in the Workplace, and we've brought you another amazing episode with our guest, Dr. Ngao Motsei. Please do make sure that you get yourself a copy of her book at all major bookstores. This is Wellness in the Workplace, and my name is Mbali Mzinyane. I will catch you on the next episode. Bye-bye.